Welcome back to another episode of the XRP podcast. Today, I'm going to be breaking it down with Mikkel. We're going to be talking about not only where we are seeing the markets head, but what kind of impact does Iran and the U.S. conflict have on the markets? We'll also take a deep dive into what's going on with XRP and Binance. Everybody's wondering about that one, so we'll get into it. Of course, as you guys know, one of the best things you can do right now is like and subscribe. We just launched a very unique feature here on the channel last week, and that is our member programs. Now, you guys could become a member very simply, just become a co-producer, just gives you some access. But now we've opened up our new member lives, which I'm doing weekly. I'm only going live here on this channel to do correlation around XRP and where the broader markets are heading. So I'm doing those. We did one last week for our members, our first few members that had jumped in. And we also have our XRP Insider group, which you guys can get early access to videos like this. So very easy to do. If you can't see this video yet, not sure it's going to be earmarked for early access or not. But if you can't, if you are a member, you will get a 12 or 24-hour early access on some of our content. So it's going to be good. I want to thank our sponsor today, and that is Uphold, where you guys can earn crypto better. A lot of things happening with Uphold staking rewards. So you can stake up to 20 different cryptocurrencies and get into the reward side of things. New tokens, early access, along with full transparency. This is one of the best platforms out there to make trades on when it comes to crypto. The other thing you guys should be doing is this right here. Get the card, the XRP rewards card, which comes in the form of an Uphold debit card. And the nice thing about this, guys, is you can do this without a credit check. Also get up to 6% back on all your purchases for the first 3 months. You can get up to 10% back with a direct deposit stacked in on this. So this is one of the best values out there when it comes to a debit card where you can get into your digital assets. Make sure and check out Uphold. Use the link down below. Let them know we sent you. A lot of things happening in the market right now. Of course, over the weekend, we had President Trump going out there and doing some more moves in the global macro component. And if you look at where the fear and greed is right now, holding at about 15, it is, though, coming up off of that bottom, which we had at around 10. So I'm still questioning whether or not that was the bottom. And I think today with Mikkel, we'll get a chance to dive in a little bit closer on this one. If you look at the current market cap, holding it around 2.37 trillion over on CoinMarketCap there. Altcoin season nowhere in sight. And of course, a lot of pressure on many of the altcoins as we start to see what's happening in Iran unfold. So I wanted to bring in Mikkel today. He is backstage, and we'll just jump into it, guys. Mikkel, how are you?
I am good. Always a pleasure to come on the show.
Yeah. So what do you, okay, you see a couple of things we're going to be hitting on. Obviously, we're showing kind of just the coin market cap situation right now. We'll take a look at some of the charts, but I wanted to flip over and take a look at what's happening, obviously, with Iran. You look at the celebrations that are coming along right now. So, no matter what position you're in as an American, it appears that the position of the Iranian people is quite a bit different. This is happening in San Francisco. So there's a big Iranian population. I drive through downtown Miami yesterday afternoon. There were Iranian flags all over the place. It was insane. I didn't know we had an Iranian population in Miami. What do you make of this?
Well, one, it shows. I think what's interesting is a lot of people took, I mean, rightfully so, the perspective that they didn't want to see United States involvement in a lot of these foreign conflicts. But
Yeah,
I think it's sort of interesting when you see the reaction from one. We saw it really in Venezuela, and now you're seeing it here. Is that
exactly.
where there's actually a lot of happiness and people are enjoying the decision in a lot of different ways. I think the saving grace here for a lot of people where this isn't turning into something that I think is outstandingly negative is the decisiveness in which these things are being taken out.
Yeah.
And it seems like so far that these haven't turned into prolonged issues. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when we get into market impact and why the market's actually positive today, despite we have some real chaos going on in the world.
Yeah.
It seems like so far there's been a strong and positive reaction from people based off of what's happening. I don't think people like to see us extending into more involvement in some of these foreign places. But if this can look anything like Venezuela, it might actually turn into a positive.
Yeah. Listen, I've done a lot of analysis on this over the years. I've gone through a lot of different presidential situations that I didn't necessarily agree with as a business owner and as a journalist. And in many cases, I look at what Trump's doing, and whether you agree with him or you don't agree with him, I think you kind of have to hold the line just as an American, because what's happening now is quite a bit different, especially if you look at the strategic scenario that's been playing out here. You just mentioned Venezuela. That's the Western Hemisphere first concept, of course, that Trump has been spouting. But nobody's done anything about what had been going on with Maduro in Venezuela until this. We had several, candidates and even presidents that recognized the atrocities in Venezuela that were happening, but the fact that he actually did something is pretty stellar. And I think, Maduro now in custody in New York. I mean, we're going to continue to see those kind of things. Plus, you took away a major oil trading channel to China. Wow. I mean, I looked at the numbers on how many billions of barrels of oil that have basically been taken off the table to China, which, if you are paying attention, you understand that is truly the only threat to the United States in terms of global power. So that's kind of interesting. And to your point, Trump didn't go in and do regime change. In fact, they just went with the next person in charge. It was like, hey, work with us or see what happens to your people there.
And I don't
So
think it's any coincidence the order of these things as well. Obviously, going into the Strait of Hormuz and having that
yeah.
potentially closed was going to have a huge impact on oil, but being able to go in and get access to Venezuela's oil prior. I mean, Venezuela is a much bigger producer and a better
Very
access point
strategic.
regardless. So to be able to go in, get control there before ultimately you cause some serious disruptions, it's almost like they alleviated the disruption before they caused it, which was a great strategic move because they were able to keep that the Venezuela situation from really blowing up too big in their face. And I think it gave them some leeway and some ability to extend themselves over in the Iran situation, which so far, I think for a lot of reasons is moving away from a lot of the big Armageddon scenarios that I think
Yeah.
doomers were forecasting. And so far, yes, obviously there's conflict, but there's nothing over the top or outright concerning I've seen so far.
So far, that has been the case. And I think a lot of people, listen, I got into a big debate Saturday night about this. And one of the people I was debating at dinner was that I said, "Listen, they were like, hey, why didn't we go ahead and go through the negotiations? Because Iran came out and said, hey, we're trying to negotiate, and then Trump strikes and takes out our supreme leader." And I said, I think you might want to take a look at how much China has been supplementing some of these really advanced missile technology to Iran. I think from what I've read from a handful of what I would say credible sources is that there were some major tech moving into the region from China, and I think that's why Trump and the administration decided to go ahead and leap forward and catch them off guard, because some of those things were like destroyer and aircraft carrier killers. Can you imagine if Trump were to lose an aircraft carrier, what that would have done? Oh my God. So that I think is one of the big reasons of where it's going. There is a tech out there that some of these high-speed supersonic missiles were being imported in, and that the Iranians were trying to gear them up, and that was why this scenario took place. Beyond that, and to your point, is that now that you have what appears to be an up market on a Monday happening to your exact sentiment there, Do you think this is kind of like what happened in Venezuela, where we're in, we get our business done, and we're out, and we let the people of that country start trying to rebuild it?
I think the big thing to pay attention to here is, this move I think was largely forecasted, right? I think if you saw a lot of the poly market odds, if you saw a lot of people talking about a potential strike in Iran, I think you really started to hear a lot of people talking about this over the course of the past 4 or 5 weeks. And one of the biggest things in terms of takes that I saw that, it's not my specialty, so I don't know if I agreed with it one way or the other, but a lot of people, I think, had a lot of concern that if we did do something in Iran, you would see potentially China or Russia join in and help fight on Iran and
Yeah.
F, which we haven't seen. They've largely been untouched. So I think the market factored in this big Armageddon, like it always goes to these World War III talks,
So far.
bad things could possibly get. And right now, you see China and Russia. I mean, China was obviously supplying weapons, but for the large part, not getting involved in the military side so far. And I think the longer you push on with it just Iran against everyone, the greater markets look at this in some way as almost ripping off the band-aid and getting over with. I think a lot of people saw this coming. A lot of people forecasted it to get really ugly and have China and Russia in on the other side. That hasn't happened so far.
Yeah.
And if we just push forward like we're pushing forward right now, it seems like China and Russia both just have a lot going on domestically where they're not really interested in causing more uncertainty and more global chaos and fighting on the other side of that. I think that's a positive for markets, and I think that's what the market's reacting to right now.
You saw that Dubai took a hit at a handful of sites there. Now they've locked down air travel, all that kind of thing. I wonder if this changes the Dubai concept of being a crypto hub. Do you think that changes it any with some instability there?
I don't know. Like looking at what actually like there was a couple places in Dubai that got hit, but I mean, I think they had like one death, and obviously you don't want to see this going on, but I think Iran, if it was a weird decision, I think, to just attack all the neighbors because it suddenly went from a, hey, this is a US Iran issue to
Yeah.
everyone all pissed at Iran in the region. So that didn't seem like it was strategically that smart of a thing to do. I think a lot of these nations kind of like to just play the middle and not really get overly involved one way or the other. But
Right.
now that kind of pushes them all against that one player. It actually creates, in my opinion, what I've seen is a bit more unity than you would expect coming out of something like this. I don't think if it has long-term implications. For me, the big concerning thing, the black swan sort of thing that I didn't want to see was any kind of China or Russia involvement in terms of joining the fight in favor of Iran. There's a lot of the
Yeah.
military drills done over the course of the last year with these people in the Strait of Hormuz. And what we're seeing is the alliances, because these people because China, Iran, and Russia, these alliances aren't as strong as you see in the West. They do a lot of these trainings together, but it doesn't seem like really they're going to fight each other's battles when it comes to situations like this. That was the real negative in my eyes. If that ends up
Exactly.
escalating, that's where things could get pretty ugly. I think a lot of people saw this as a point that could ignite that second layer of escalation, but so far we haven't seen it. And I think that's why the markets are reacting pretty positively. Anything else outside of that, I don't think this goes too long. I think Iran on their own, there's too many people joining against them. I think it fizzles out pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think, the situation, it's kinda like the gravity of what some of these early stage moves is doing to the global macro side of things is getting even more elevated. I think more prevalent. If you just look at what happened in Venezuela, Cuba's the proof of that, because when we look at the Western Hemisphere doctrine, because nobody invaded Cuba, but now Havana's basically imploding on its own weight just because of what's happened in Venezuela. So one of the biggest concerns we had in the region, of course, Cuba, 90 miles off my coast here. But now, I mean, what is it? I think I saw somewhere 90% of families are already having problems. Schools are already down. Hospitals are losing. I mean, this place is in. Eventually, you're going to get an overthrow of these oppressive regimes to where nobody can rise to power like what we have seen both in Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, etc. So, which is only good, I think, for the people of those countries, no matter what. So
Yeah, and I
it's
think
crazy.
generally, I think you kind of had you had so much like you said, past administrations have talked about this. You've seen a lot of forecasting into seeing something like this. I think the big unknown here was how much would this turn into something like we've seen before in the past, where
Yeah.
everyone starts picking sides and then you get a much bigger global conflict. I don't think each one of these places is too much of a problem for the United States to handle on their own, as we saw in Venezuela. The thing is, are you going to have another superpower get involved on the other side of it? And I think that's the uncertainty being removed here, because a lot of people who studied this very closely did
Yeah.
come out and say, hey, China would get involved if there was something in Iran, or China would get involved in something in Venezuela. And those sort of things just haven't materialized. And for me, I think the market was probably pricing in this not going as smoothly as it did.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Which is kind of where we are right now, getting into the markets. Let's move over to the topic of clarity, because we could go on for hours on this whole strategy that Trump has got in play. We'll probably do a podcast on this. I've got a couple of the guys that study this in some of the defense podcasts that are friends of mine. I should get them on the show because these guys are like ex-SEALs and strategic command guys that have done this. So they probably bring some good insights. They know nothing about the market, but they know about strategy.
I was joking around. It seemed like the worst trade going into Trump's presidency because of how much talk there was about global peace was in the defense sector. Now the defense sector
Now I'm living it.
not the best trade.
My defense and energy stocks are up like crazy right
Yeah,
now. Yeah.
it's funny how those things work out.
I'll show you guys some of the stocks I'm in before the end of the show. So I put out this tweet this morning. This is the March deadline was missed on the Clarity Act. The stall, obviously, we all know is the yield wall. This sucks. Crypto side is demanding. Obviously, we know everybody. If you've been under a rock and you haven't seen this, but the big problem is yields, because what we are in right now is really a fight, I think, for what will be stablecoins becoming much more popular. Because I'm concerned if you do knock away yield, you're going to continue to thwart the opportunity of Circle, RLUSD, what's happening with Ripple. Banking side, still terrified of deposit flight. Where I think this boils down to right now, if no deal is reached, regulation by enforcement, whether it's coming from the SEC or the OCC, who knows? But we may end up with, but it could, I think, trigger some institutional inflow, even if that were to happen later this year. Morgan has kind of predicted that. The timeline right now, I think, is going to be April, if we can get some negotiations going on in the Senate. And then the soft and final deadline would probably be July. Before, if we don't get it done before then, I think it's over. What do you think?
So I would say I'll jump on my timing comment in a minute here. I think the funny sort of thing here is there's this big fight over yield, right? And like at to a certain point, I'm kind of just like, you just give them the concession. You're a cryptocurrency company, and just apply to be a bank. It's like, hopefully we can just have some of these companies apply to be
Yeah.
banks, and it's a total workaround. But I do think it's funny that the banking lobby is so concerned about their inferior product sets that they're literally saying, hey, this could be systemically terrible for our businesses if you let a fair competition happen
Yeah.
on the yield side. It shows the power and the importance of this technology. We're creating things that are so powerful and so transformational to the way capital markets work that the incumbents who have dominated the industry for the past 100 years are literally saying that if you don't put in policy to prevent this from happening, this new product, this new financial rail is going to blow up our existing business model. I think
Yeah.
that's extremely powerful in terms of the technology that is being created here. I think from an investor perspective, time is always a difficult thing to sort out. I think the positive sign here is that you don't have a technology this powerful, this important, having such disruption to the legacy way of life that it just fizzles out and doesn't become anything, regardless of how long it takes them to get regulation correct. Eventually, we're going to move one way or the other here. And I almost don't think it matters from the investment perspective. I think it's going to be an extremely powerful narrative for either the cryptocurrency companies that are already harnessing the technology or the
Yep.
banking institutions that are forced to adopt it so they don't have to rely on the policy people anymore to be digging their own moats. But the final thing is I do think they get it done, honestly. I think a lot of what we're seeing in the public marketplace is the negotiations happening in real time.
Yeah.
I mean, people can't
Well, I'm showing this.
negotiate. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm showing this tweet here by David Sachs. It's obviously the crypto and AI czar, and also the boss of Patrick Witt, who is the guy somewhat, I think, tasked with the negotiations right now. This was an interesting statement to come out late last week. And Sachs basically said Patrick Witt is doing an amazing job brokering the compromise between the banks and crypto. No one is working harder to get the market structure legislation because I think he was getting some pressure. I know we had given him some pressure on our shows. And then crypto has made major concessions on stablecoin yield. I haven't heard of major concessions. Maybe there's something that was brewing late last week, and it's time for the banks to reciprocate. So this is literally the White House pivoting on putting pressure on the banks to get this deal done. What do you think they're actually putting pressure on the banks?
It's one of those things. I think that the more important takeaway here is we're not going to know the full story of what's in the public, right?
Yeah,
They're using the public as a negotiating arm between these two things. So
no
all of
doubt.
them are making public statements. And at the end of the day, our emotions and our outreach is part of getting a deal done here. I think regardless of where this ends up, I think there's been too much work where this doesn't get over the finish line. I just think regardless of what that final concession is, they're going to have to push something over the finish line here because so much time and effort has already been done on this front. So I do think they get it done. In terms of where the concessions are being made, I think it's going to end up in the place where there's going to be a certain level of protection against a non-bank institution offering a
Yeah.
yield on a dollar denominated product. It seems to me Coinbase was the real person fighting against this. I think they probably had some momentum in the early days. I've said because of the direction the crypto industry has gone in terms of just having some real sell off pressure, I think they've lost a lot of the momentum they had to
Mm.
negotiate on. And like I said, I don't think it's going to be something overly negative in the long run. I think these sort of things, these policy implementations, ultimately workarounds happen. Whether Coinbase works with a bank that helps them offer yield on their platform, or there's some other derivative of Circle and Ripple just becoming banks and then they can offer yield. I just feel like there's so many workarounds. It's really hard for me to imagine that we just die on this hill and potentially go into the next election or midterms without any clarity here. It just seems like such a small thing to be totally wrapped up in.
I want to take a minute, guys, and just invite you to join the Barron Market Edge private member group. You guys can do that by just clicking the link down in our description. This is your insider's edge to the AI and crypto money revolution, which is what we really focus on here on PBN. This is additional research that I do along with our team. And we have a pretty significant team on our research around not only what guides our episodes, but a lot of that research gets built into more content that I drop here on the Barron Market Edge. We do market trends and sentiment analysis, which can be anything from tokens to all sorts of strategies. This, of course, will also guide you over to our Telegram group, and we give this as elite community access. You get bonus content over there, including tax guides, as well as different kinds of asset guides out there that we drop all the time. This is your 10-year vision in action. All you have to do, of course, is just hit that little subscribe button or join the community and get in on it. It's absolutely free. It doesn't cost you a thing. So check it out. Listen, I didn't think it would go this far, to be honest with you. I thought we were going to get it last fall after the president basically came out and said August is the deadline. Remember, we were looking at this for the last year. This has been something that has been trying to get through. So I'm a little less um, positive about it. I'm more concerned. I think there's other issues at work here that are causing whatever we're not seeing happen in terms because you would I think to your point is it seems like the line in the sand could just be drawn. Let's get it done and it's over. What is holding that back, I think, are these PACs, obviously the American Banking Association's lobby. Then you have, of course, Coinbase's lobby. This is, I think it boils down to midterms, who's got the stronger position to possibly cause some chaos.
And you have to kind of laugh at the entire thing because at the end of the day, I mean, you kind of have to think like, who cares what Coinbase or the bank lobby thinks? Like, shouldn't the politicians be putting forward the bill that makes
Yeah, good luck on that.
yeah, in terms of protecting Americans? It's like who cares what the banking lobby or Coinbase thinks? Just pass the bill that's going to make the most sense in terms of how this technology
Oh
is
boy.
gonna move forward in the future.
Come on,
Isn't that
Mikkel.
what the job is?
Though that is the job. Yes, you got the job right. The problem is executing the job, which is the issue, of
No,
course.
I remember the first time, I forgot who I was on the phone with, but, when Coinbase pulled their support from the bill, it was just so funny because everyone, like, threw their hands up in panic. It's like, "Coinbase is gone." It's like, "Alright, well,
Who's next?
what impact does that really make at the end of the day? It's either a good bill or it's a bad bill."
Yeah.
Obviously, Coinbase has their incentives for what they want the bill to look like. The banks have their incentives for what they want the bill to look like. Let's just go make a bill that makes the most sense in terms of innovation and consumers, not what each one of these parties is requiring gets
Yeah.
jammed in there. So the whole process is a little bit of a, it's hard to even wrap your head around why it's even happening. I just like I said, the banks need this technology. Coinbase wants us over the finish line. The crypto industry does. I think the banks are integrating this. Like whatever it is, I think they're going to
Seems
hit a brick
natural.
wall at some point and say, "Hey, we can't do this any longer." But until they get to this point, I think both of them are incentivized to squeeze out every last bit of negotiation they can.
Well, and just remember, over the weekend, we a lot of people were concerned about what we would see in the market in general and I mean, because with what's happening in Iran, Bitcoin, I think briefly dipped. I think it was around 300 million in long positions were liquidated. Notable, but not necessarily catastrophic in any position. So to your point, this is still being played out in DC when it comes to crypto and how this could line up here. ISM manufacturing PMI came in at 52.4. This is expected at 51.8. So basically, what it's saying above 50 means U.S. economy is in expansion phase, but yet we're seeing this massive job losses in the community. I don't know. Did you see that line list of companies just laying off people due to AI automation? Did you see this?
Oh yeah. No, I have a lot of people who work in like data analysts and stuff like that. And they just say every single meeting it's like 20% of the room is gone.
Oh my gosh. Where do you position the job loss in, say, a year from now? Does it have possibly a true economic impact, or where are you standing on this? Do you think AI is gonna create more jobs, or in the early stages, it's gonna go in and kinda cannibalize a lot of jobs, and then you're gonna find new jobs developing? What do you think?
It's so hard because I think the harder thing to wrap your head around is like historically, right? Historically, you can look at every single technology that's ever been implemented and make an extremely good case why it's going to kill jobs. I mean,
Yeah.
even like farm equipment, right? You don't have thousands of people going and tilling field. You have these robots, but ultimately that creates better food situations in the United States. With more food, you can have a larger population. It opens up new industries, more innovation, and you need new people to go work at those new jobs. Like I think same thing for the internet. Like each one of these technologies in its own right has completely disrupted a huge piece of business and
Yeah.
disintermediated so many jobs, but on the other side, it's created new jobs. I think AI is the first thing where people are starting to think like, oh my God, you could have this AI running its own company to a certain degree.
Well, I think the key is it's the circular momentum, you
Yes.
know, because when jobs get disrupted, there's solutions that come in to feed that disruption, which creates more economic, exposure. And the problem is now I don't know if you've seen that Venn diagram that shows AI disrupts, increases productivity, which then gets AI to create the productivity answers, not people, and that's where it breaks the model. So this one is a little bit more concerning because of that in itself. I had a pretty good AI analyst and guy that was working on much of the OpenAI team on this podcast about 3 months ago, and he basically said that, Wall Street had 1 year. All analysts on Wall Street would be gone in 12 months. Quant companies completely isolated into a handful of teams. So essentially, you're talking about just a fraction of the population that runs Wall Street. What do you think that's real?
To a certain degree, it's hard for me to believe it's not real. My question is what do those people like do? Is there a new vertical that's opened up in there that's needed for something else?
Mhm.
That's the hardest thing to see because ultimately the demand isn't created for what those humans are going to end up doing until
Exactly. Yeah.
disruption takes place. So I do think there is going to be something like I don't necessarily subscribe to this Armageddon scenario where like suddenly no one has any jobs and like no like I think there's going to be things that are difficult for us to see the utility of or hey, if I told you this was a job right now that would be a job in the future, it's difficult to wrap your head around why you would need that, but I think the disruption from AI will ultimately open up those things. I just from all the times in history where you have had this happen, there's been so many great arguments on why this technology would be the technology just kill jobs, but humans are extremely resourceful and there's always something else humans can be doing to go create that next big thing. And the truth is, and this is the biggest piece of why it's hard to see, is because until humans are freed up and until humans are no longer doing that task that AI is replacing, no
Uh-huh.
one's working on that next thing. So it moves the human away from whatever tasks they're doing in the current moment to go focus on higher level tasks. AI is an interesting one, like you said, because it's so circular. I
Yeah.
just something in me makes me think there's going to be something on the other side of this. AI won't replace everything, albeit things like Wall Street analysts, graphic designers, thumbnail creation, EAs and stuff like that. It's hard for me to imagine that those people aren't going to be replaced pretty quickly here with what AI is already capable of.
Yeah, the tool set that I mean, we've been using it for years, and we started building some LLMs even within our own products and services that we're building outside of not only this business, but our other businesses that we're in. And I have been shocked at the speed in which, because I always questioned whether or not it would be able to do certain things. The data analysts alone side of things that we used to pay a fairly significant salaries to, that job is just not existent any longer. So, very interesting.
No, I wake up every morning and I used to send out a whole bunch of DMs and talk to people I know in industry and kind of just let them know what I'm thinking, let them know what I'm seeing, and just get their opinions on it.
Yeah.
I love to get pushback, hear the other side of it. Now I wake up and I have a probably like an hour long conversation with Grok. Not me asking Grok for answers, but just
Yep.
having it fetch me data. Like, what is this company doing in the marketplace? What is
Yeah.
this person doing? Who's growing here? And that is totally something that I will never interact with a human again on. It's just too easy, too consistent
Exactly. Yeah.
for me to interact with AI there. And there's a whole bunch of stuff like that. I mean, in terms of even in the very beginning, like you couldn't really get it to do very good visuals and it's sort of hit and miss in terms of editing. It's hard for me not to imagine that in a year from now, I won't be able to drop a video in a folder and have it fully edited and uploaded to YouTube without me doing a single thing.
Yeah, I think we're pretty close to that now,
Yeah.
with a lot of the tools I've seen and we've even used to a certain extent. YouTube is kinda and podcasting, I think is one of those last little components that require a very unique human nature to be able to analyze the situation, spin off of it, go research something live. I mean, it's like real time, until we get to that level of information analysis, especially when you're looking at not only markets, but media, which often, kind of push the narratives going of how the markets react. A good example of that is this right here. A lot of people were getting a little bit panicked on the idea of so much XRP moving to the Binance platform. When you saw this, what was the first thing? Were you concerned at all that this was happening? I mean, there's many people who are saying, "Hey, this could be a huge sell-off situation. 472 million moving in 7 days. Is this a bearish signal?" What were your takes?
So two, one, I've looked at through my time in crypto. You see these things all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
whether it's an early Satoshi era whale moving over assets to Coinbase, even in early Satoshi era whale dumping Bitcoin on an exchange, but there's just not a big correlation to a lot of these things in terms of price action. And I'll give you like I honestly have no idea what they're moving it for, but even just on the counter end of it, I mean you could see a situation. We just saw Binance ramping up its ROUSD incentive
Right.
triple in terms of distributing that. For all we know, there's a new incentive that's going to come out through Binance. Maybe it has something to do with ODL. Maybe it has something to do directly with XRP. Those are the things we really don't know in terms of the other side of this. And I'll just say, for every single time you see something like this and say, oh, this must be a whale dumping, it doesn't really make sense in terms of timing. I think what you've seen from any sophisticated players in the market, especially looking at stats like the amount of 1 million XRP wallets, these stats are going up. So what you see
Mhm.
normally at these bottoms is whales accumulating and retail selling out. This sort of doesn't really fit that narrative. So could it be a large whale getting liquidated of some sort? Maybe, or they're forced to post margin or something like that.
Yeah.
There's so many different things, but I'll say smart money normally is buying lows and
Mhm.
retail is normally selling the lows. So a whale dumping at this time doesn't really make a lot of sense in terms of consistency on that front.
Yeah, I'm looking at I'll show the chart to you guys because this, I think, is something that everybody always loves to kind of get hot takes on this. This is the XRP daily chart. And outside of this dip that we saw go down to 120, for those of you that grabbed in that range, kudos to you. I think anytime it sees major dips, that's the first thing I do is I reach to go buy XRP. Anytime I can get a major dip like that. But even since that dip, if you look at just where we are right now, I won't even go to the wick, but to the close and where we're holding, I mean, that's a 15% move here, Mikkel. That's 15% that we're seeing. And people are saying, oh, well, the market's not moving. I'm like, that's a 15% move in 2 weeks, guys. What exactly are you looking for when you get these? What do you think is going to happen from here, though? Right now, sentiment is kind of neutral on XRP. Do you think this is going to push back this 140 range and blast through, or do you think we're going to hold the line for a bit?
I think the Iran situation is going to be a big play here. I think everything is dropping into line except for oil going up, for interest rate slashing going into the middle part of this year, late next year,
Yep.
and to go back into a very expansionary economy. I think these
Yep.
things are absolutely critical for the macro environment around XRP and around crypto. I think if this Iran situation is over, you're going to have virtually no impact, and it's going to confirm that we are going into that expansionary low interest rate cycle. I think if things get worse from here and you have a prolonged thing going on and oil leads to more inflation and the Fed needs to keep rates high, I think that's when you get a little bit more of a slog in the market. I think
Yeah.
what XRP is telling you in real time is what it's pricing in the possibility of these outcomes. It's up this morning, like we talked about earlier, because maybe the escalation in Iran wasn't as much as a lot of people were forecasting.
Mhm.
And I really think if this closes out pretty quickly and there's not big disruptions and people now feel like this Iran situation kind of had the band-aid ripped off, I think we're going to see XRP really bounce back along with the rest of the cryptocurrency industry pretty hard here.
Well, and to the point, you're seeing the Bitcoin price right now as we're filming, it's starting to push towards 70K. You look at not only that, but also where Ethereum has been moving here recently. There's the ETH Bitcoin would trade, which seems to be starting to edge up a little bit. ETH being a little bit better play, but right also Bitcoin, or excuse me, ETH starting to push over 2K, which has been kind of holding that position. But this is definitely a breakout period area that I think if we reach it on ETH, this could signify some pretty big moves. I think on a handful of other tokens, including XRP, which I think could end up being one of the bigger winners here, especially if something happens in Japan around all of this news on SBI. If you guys didn't catch our video with Soto Watanabe of Sonium, go back and look at that video. It's over on the main channel. We talked about very key things that SBI was doing, and SBI very correlated to what's not only happening with Ripple, but also happening with XRP. So this could be one of the key things that starts to trigger a market move, which is what's going on in Japan.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with that more. And I just think what you've seen in terms of the macro environment, it's essentially been this last leg or this last stage before things flip around. I think things like XRP at the end of 2024 performed really well because there was so much positivity in terms of the ETFs and stuff like that. but the macro environment really wasn't favorable yet. I think we're going to have a flip there. I think we're finally going to move into this lower interest rate environment. That, along with a lot of the institutional type adoption happening in the United States with something like Clarity, I think we're going to have a bit of a perfect storm where all these things come together and you see a big reversal in the market. And I think XRP is going to continue to lead the way, kind of like it has over the course of the last year and a half.
Yeah. If you're telling people, I know you and I would probably tell people XRP is kind of your number one, but if you're telling people to put a basket together right now, as we see these depressed markets, not financial advice, but when well, you are a financial advisor. What am I talking about? You could do this. Um, if you get a basket together, I need 3 tokens to build on for, a moderate portfolio of, say, $10,000 or less, nothing too crazy. And they're willing to go into digital assets. Where would you place that mix in a basket right now?
That's a fantastic question, and I can give financial advice to my clients. I kind of generally solicit it, but in terms of just a very broad for fun recommendation, I think the first two things. I think, especially if you're new to crypto, I think you have to hold some Bitcoin at the end of the day. Like, if you're someone who's really using this more as a sector outperformance piece, and you're a little
Yeah.
bit more of a enthusiast on a specific technology, that's one thing. But if you're just going for a basket, I think what you have with Bitcoin is that OG digital collectible. It's almost impossible to look at any scenario where you're buying Bitcoin on lows like we're seeing right here, and it
Mhm.
doesn't outperform over a 5-10 year time horizon. XRP is one of the few cryptocurrencies through all of Bitcoin's history, one of the only ones to keep pace with Bitcoin's price. It's one of the only ones that hasn't
That's a good
descended
point.
over time against Bitcoin. You can take a look at the XRP to Bitcoin pair. One of my favorite things about XRP and Bitcoin is they move very counter cyclically. One goes up, the other's trading sideways, the other trades sideways, the
Yep.
other's going up. XRP also has a unique play on the institutional adoption side of actually using these cryptocurrencies for something more than just collecting them. And then I think your last big decision, if you're building a basket of three, is, does Ethereum fit into that basket for you? For me, I would choose to maybe take a little bit more upside potential on the other side of that. Take a little bit more of a spec play in there for something potentially disrupting Ethereum. For me, Ethereum's tech has been a little lagging. I don't love the leadership coming out of the Ethereum Foundation. For me, I would actually like to take a bet coming in there to supplement my more legacy blue chip XRP and Bitcoin plays into something, I don't know, maybe like a Flare, or maybe that you could take a look at, like an HBAR, an XDC, or maybe even something potentially a little bit newer. But I think you could probably take something a little bit more of a cutting edge technology, something that we haven't seen really play out as much, and take a speculative bet there. But I think building a core portfolio against Bitcoin and XRP and then adding something a little bit newer, I think that's how I would target a basket in the current environment.
Hey, listen, HBAR is an interesting one to me because the same kind of thing. If you were buying back at the beginning of February, not even 30 days ago on HBAR, if you bought that dip, you're up 30% right now. That's just on HBAR, the token, buying spot. So not anything advanced. It's interesting you said HBAR because I think those would be the 3 for me right now is Bitcoin, XRP, HBAR,
One of the
which would
things I like
continue.
about HBAR a lot is Bitcoin. Obviously, you got this digital gold sort of collectibles,
Yeah.
reserve asset. XRP, more of a liquidity monetary instrument and payment. HBAR really is doing a lot of stuff on data, Internet of Things, and I think it's been a harder one to figure out what a monetary value associated with that's
Mhm.
going to look like in the long
Yeah.
run. But I think overall it's extremely powerful, especially going into agentic services, different robots paying each other, having a platform for information exchange. I think HBAR fits a lot of those things. And there's a lot of big players connected, whether that's on the governing council or just starting to build out different applications on that network. I think there's a lot of promise there. And I think for me, it's got an interesting sort of segment in sort of the Internet of Information side of
Right.
things, not strictly from a monetary standpoint.
I'm looking at, which is one of the reasons I like the HBAR model. They're gonna be doing a big event down here in Miami. Are you coming for the consensus event?
I think so.
Okay. Well, if you come, we got to get together because there's a lot happening. You take a look at gold right now, holding the 52, almost breaking 5,300 on Monday morning as we get, obviously for obvious reasons. It's the issue around, the narrative that we're going to see, I think, continuing to press as we see the issue in Iran coming. I would promise you guys some or not some tokens, but just where I am on certain stocks. So this is one right here that I'm interested in. Again, not financial advice, but it's ASTS. This is a company that basically is like a Starlink play. They're into satellites, doing a lot of direct to cell kind of issues. VST, which is Vistra Corp, this is an energy play. There's Lockheed, which has been flying, by the way. My Lockheed stock has just been going nuts. Here's another energy play. This is Quanta Services, one that I'm in that's continuing to break all-time highs here. So we're at 75, 71. This one is continuing to fly. Look at that chart right there. That's Quanta Services, another energy. And then I bought some Netflix last week.
That's a hard one to ever go wrong with.
Yeah, and then Netflix, of course, bails out of the deal with Warner, and then they skyrocket because they get confirmation of what they're going to be dealing with. So that's another one. So just for you guys, if you're looking for a handful of stocks to pair with your gold, your Bitcoin, your XRP, your HBAR, whatever it might be, just some other ideas there for you. Hey, Mikkel, always fun breaking it down. We definitely want to chat more about where this clarity situation is going to be brewing next week when we get you in, because I think we're going to see some big news coming out of DC next week or this week for sure. So be on the lookout for that. You guys know what to do. Follow Mikkel over there on YouTube. Follow him there and drop a comment. Give him a hard time. Say that you saw him here on the show. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, Paul.
All right, you guys know what to do. Like, subscribe, and thanks again. We'll catch you next time right here on the XRP Pod. Take care.